Ooh, everybody so early today. Sorry, I'm still setting up on the back end. We'll be there in a little bit. Good to see you, Hudson. It's good to see you, Has3D. Welcome, welcome. Two more people to set up, and then we'll switch things up. Just bear with me for a second. Got a whole bunch of people today, so we'll see what the pacing for this one is going to be like, because, yeah, whole bunch of people. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. Oh, Jimmy turned around. Welcome, welcome to the stream. Happy to have you here. Yeah, sorry about like the no face cam just yet. We're gonna start in just a little bit. Still need to set one person up, and then we should be good to jump over, and then I can focus on the thing. Where's Harry? Uh-oh. Something... Oh. Dang it, I screwed it up. No. Okay, okay, okay. It's all fine. It's all fine. No stress. No pressure. Eh. Dylan. Don't do that. So many images. Okay, final thing here. We're gonna get started in just a second. Sorry about the delay, everyone. Cool. Should be good now. Save this. Let's save that. Ooh, 17 people today. Gonna be fun. Okay. Put on my sweater and then we'll get started. All right, all right. Let's get this show on the road. Hey, Justin. Long time no see, everybody. What happened, Justin? You just vanished all of a sudden. It's good to see you back, man. Yeah, so good to see everybody here. Ozim Nkomo is here as well. Hello, hello. Welcome to chat. Hello, Dat. You're doing well as well. Good to see you too. Right, so we have 17 people today. So it's going to be a pretty short introduction. I just want to give like some highlights of the week, a little bit of an introduction here. So my week has been going well. I've been doing a lot of work on the course that we're currently building. So that is taking up a lot of time. I'm also doing a bunch of preparation for our event that's going to come in the weekend, our BE Unwrapped, about how to start a new project. So I'm gathering, for this one, what I'm trying to do is I'm gathering a bunch of resources and I'm basically setting up like a bunch of questions so that I'm going to turn it into like a lesson. And then it's going to be like I don't know, like a 30-minute kind of like interactive lesson / presentation, and then we'll dive into the questions after that as well. And I think that's sort of like the format that I kind of want to go for the foreseeable future. So, yeah, I think that's going to be very interesting. So we're kind of trying some new stuff. I'm excited about this one, especially because it is new, it is fresh, and it is something that I can just pour myself into, and it's a little bit more structured as well. So that's going to be really cool to see that coming along. Like I said, the first one is going to be like how to start a new environment project. And I'm basically going to be, in rough terms, like I'm going to be talking about who you are as an artist, how you need to see yourself and your portfolio, and then building projects that can help you skill up on your portfolio, right? So it's going to be like relatively portfolio oriented because we're focusing on like the commercial side of things, right? So yeah, it's going to be how to figure out where you want to get started, what interests you, how to start a project, like what to focus on when building a project, a little bit of timeline planning, all that kind of stuff. We're going to dive into all that good stuff on Sunday. So Sunday at 8, basically same time as we're doing this right now, but it's going to be on a Sunday. And then, of course, on Saturday, we have a workshop with Yu Chu. Lovely, lovely guy. We just chatted this weekend just to do a little bit of a check-in. But that workshop is going to be freaking awesome as well. That workshop is going to be all about the material layering system inside of Unreal Engine 5. And he's going to basically do an explanation about like the whole thing and work with examples and how it can be used in really cool ways. So yeah, looking forward to that as well. Yeah, that's basically, it's just organizing, trying to get stuff ready. Yeah, it's stressful, but it's exciting, and I'm looking forward to the weekend. Yeah, let's not delay. Let's switch it over to the actual review. So for people that are new, if you're new to this chat, if you're new to the channel, first of all, welcome. Lovely to have you. But if you have any questions about environment art in games, the games industry by itself, myself, my work, for whatever reason, feel free to ask away, and we can kind of just put some like nice little vignettes of conversation in between like all the feedback, because sometimes the feedback does get a little bit intense, you know. For people that are here for a while now, you can certainly see when I get into my headspace. Yeah, feel free to ask any questions as they come up, and then we can sort of discuss them as we go along. Hey, loves. Hey, Bulborbs. Good to see you. Good to see you. And then Dennis is here as well. Blake, Tom, and Vale. Vale is back. Good to see you both. Oh, and you too, Dennis. Sorry, I didn't want to leave you behind like that. Okay, that being said, let's get started. So, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing the same thing as we recently introduced, is I'm going to be jumping into the... Where is it? I'm going to be jumping into the event room. And I'm going to be chilling in there. So if you're participating in Whip Wednesday, if you want some feedback, but you want to do it in person, you can join me on the stage as well, like in our Discord channel. And then we will bring you up onto the stage. And then you can put your hand up, we'll put you on the stage, and then we can start discussing about your work. So just set this up. There we go. That is in the channel. Cool. So before we move on with that, I'm gonna see if we can pick up some people first, and then we'll switch over to you, Dad. But thank you for joining so quickly. Let's see. First one that I want to discuss is from Justin. Justin is working on the Warding Temple. I'm back working on this project for tonight's whip. My main questions are: be back on the current lighting. I've been adjusting it to be more centralized aligned to focal point, as well as adding some fog cards to help separate the background and the foreground a little bit more. Any inconsistencies to the composition you think disrupts the atmosphere of the scene? So those are like two separate questions, right? So we'll dive into question number one. So one, lighting, and two, oh my god, that doesn't even look like a two. Two, composition inconsistencies. Not sure what you mean by that, because the composition hasn't really changed all that much, right? So let's dive into it. First of all, lighting. So it definitely feels more focused around like the focal point, right? We don't. I remember previous times we had like distractions here. I think this space was really distracting as well. So now all the attention goes towards the focal point, which is quite nice. I think, in my opinion, you didn't have to do that drastic of a measure. It was more about like balancing the different lights that you already had in the scene to be like less distracting for the main focal point, in my opinion, right? So yeah, but I mean that's up to you, right? Like it's your art. You do whatever you want with it. So from that perspective, it definitely works to have the first part to be definitely more focused and centralized on like the main topic. That is definitely working. It definitely feels way more focused. The idea of like separating the background and the foreground, I don't think that's that effective yet, because in terms of like the values that you're introducing with the fog cards, right? You're introducing white to the whole scene. But the God rays, they also introduce white, right? I mean, I'm over exaggerating. It's like bluish kind of light, but those values are relatively similar. So what you're trying to do and trying to separate the foreground from the background is probably not really working, because what you probably want to do, if you want to separate this out, right? And what that really means in a lot of cases is just make the silhouette more visible. If you want to make that more visible, then we need to introduce contrast. Right? So what we're doing right now is we have the God rays coming in and we have the fog in the back of it, and they reduced contrast because they have very similar sorts of values. So I think it's actually doing the opposite of what you were trying to do. Not saying that it's necessarily a bad idea to have like some more layering in the scene, because I think it could definitely use it, right? So that you have a little bit of like atmospheric fog and you kind of have some dust in the air and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I would look at it in those terms. Like try to look at like the more fundamental layer, right? Because if you say I added fog cards to help separate the background from the foreground a little bit more, we have to separate the values out more. And I think honestly, with adding the fog cards, or like with the God rays coming in and the lighting coming in, I think that's already having a lot of effect in just like separating the center from the outside, right? Because that's what we're trying to do with God rays. We're trying to make sure that that there's a separation between the focal point and then everything outside of the focal point, right? That's what we're trying to do with God rays. So think about it in those terms. Like increase the contrast if you wanna separate it out. Or now that I'm saying it, that sounds kind of wrong though, right? Because it's not necessarily only about the contrast. The thing that I'm pointing out is that if you want to have your focal point stand out, yeah. So it is right, but then what we're doing is we're reducing the amount of atmospheric layering, right? So okay, different idea. What I would do in this case is I would try, because the way that I always think about it is I'm trying to build from the ground up as much as I can, right? And atmospheric depth is a more fundamental level than just having a God ray there. So I would probably do that. I would reduce the amount of lighting that comes in through the god rays and probably just like hide them for a little bit. Try to go through the scene by balancing out like the atmospheric depth that you kind of want, right? So that you have like a clear separation between all the levels, and then reintroduce the god ray where it balances with the atmospheric depth that you added. That is probably like a better way of going about it, because then we're building from the ground up instead of we have this god ray and now I'm trying to like sort of shift like the rest around it, right? So that's probably a better way of working. So foundational things first. And this applies to a lot of stuff, right? Like that's the way that I apply my set dressing, for example. I'll think about like how water flows, or what the terrain looks like, or what the, you know, like the very fundamental layers before I start thinking about like, oh, I kind of want to have like specific storytelling to happen here. We kind of need to build up from the ground up. So foundations first. So in this case, I would try to figure out like what you're gonna do with your layer separation or your atmospherics first. And then come in with your god ray to balance things out again. Like Tom is saying, yeah, the lighting is really nice now. My favorite version yet. Oh yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, feel free to share your thoughts in the chat as well if you have them. We'll sprinkle those in as well, because it's not only me trying to help people, right? Like we can all help each other as well, like giving each other feedback too. Yeah. So that's the way that I would think about it. Then talking about like the composition inconsistencies. I'm not too sure what you mean by that. Inconsistencies to the composition that you think disrupt the atmosphere of the scene. I'm not too sure about that. Like there might be like a minor thing where I kind of like the balancing way better between like these orange lights and the blue. So maybe you could try and like reintroduce it here, because now if we kind of zoom out, like you kind of have, let me remove this layer for a bit. You do have an area that is like lit up, but like it is weighted towards like the right side of the screen, right? So it's kind of like pushed towards the right. What I'm trying to do with adding those lights back in is I'm trying to like reintroduce like a little bit of balance on the left side of the frame, right? You see what I'm saying? Like I will look at something like this and I'll be like, everything seems to be like heavily leaning towards the right. Not that that's necessarily like a bad thing. It can also be like an effective way of like guiding like the player in some, or like the viewer in some sort of way, right? So not necessarily that that is bad. That is just my gut instinct in terms of the way that I would approach things. Because like I said before, like the way that you had balanced the lights in earlier iterations, that was the main issue. I don't think the lights being there were like the main issue. Let's see, is there some kind of shadow projected over the scene or post-processing? Oh yeah, so Justin is using like a cloud projection on my lighting. Yeah, you can use some what is it, light functions, right? Like you can basically just plug in like a texture map. It's been a while since I used it. They kind of look lopsided with the orange. You're right, it was used to guide the eye. I can play around a little bit. Yeah, so I can get that, right? It was like a nice transition of like, hey, you're trying to guide people down the staircase onto the bell. And that is quite nice, right? But even if we have like a doorway here that shines like a little light like into this cave, that's not necessarily going to destroy what you've deliberately built here. So it's just, again, it's about how we balance things, right? Just be very subtle, just a little bit on the left. Let's see. So, okay, but that brings up an interesting point. So you're saying that you use the cloud projection on my lighting. Here we go again. I feel like I bring this up every time, but be careful about the amount of noise that you're introducing in the scene, because the scene by itself is already really noisy. So if you then add like more noise or like more contrast with like cloud projections and all that kind of stuff, do it in like a very subtle way rather than like a noticeable way. Try to manage the amount of just noise that you're introducing into the environment like a little bit better. I know, beating a freaking dead horse here, but I still wanted to bring it up anyway. Because that might be introducing like some noise as well. I'll add like a warning sign with visual noise. Louis C is saying, in my opinion, the material on the bell feels more like jade than a rusty, mossy stone. Yeah, I agree. Not necessarily jade, but I do get what you mean. Like it feels too uniform. Where it's probably better to condense things down and have them like even more condensed down to like smaller regions so that it kind of feels more like oxidization that's happening for a reason rather than the whole thing is oxidized, right? You kind of have to look at it from like an artistic perspective rather than sometimes like a realistic perspective, because this might be realistic, because the whole thing is going to be like very moist, so there's going to be a lot of water that's introduced on the whole copper surface, right? So it's going to oxidize at some point. But it is more interesting from like, again, like a visual perspective where we just have it in the crevices or in certain areas or something like that, because that allows us to distinguish the materials better. So that's a good point, Luis. Shazar is bringing up the same point as well. Yeah, highlighting that there's like water in the middle as well. I think the same thing here, right? It comes down to like the amount of noise that is there. And it kind of... you have to find a way to balance it. Like introduce like bigger shapes that allow like a bit more rest in the area. And then break it up with like smaller shapes and find like a more consistent shape hierarchy between things. But don't want to keep beating on that horse. That horse is properly dead. So yeah, thank you, Justin, for sharing your work. I hope that was helpful, and good to see you back, man. Keep up the good work. Definitely, like with the lighting, it's way more focused than it was before, so that's a really good job. Keep at it, man. Nearly at the finish point. And yeah, the lighting is like way more balanced. It feels way better than it did. So good stuff. Love to see it. Cool. Where are we in the list? Where is that? Thanks, Tim. No worries. Okay. Dad, do you want to come onto the scene? Let me just quickly double check some stuff here. Okay, cool. Good. You want to raise your hand, buddy? And then we'll bring you up on the stage. Let's move that out of the way. Hello, Dad. How's it going?
Pretty good.
What can I help with today?
So I just brought the tree into ZBrush and started detailing it this week. So I had two versions. One I showed to my professors and they did not like it at all. So for the weekend, I reworked it so that it had like a taper on top and had a more uniform flow.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's where I'm at for today.
Okay. And what can I help with then?
I was wondering what you thought of the tree, basically, just like any feedback personally.
I mean, the tapering of the tree makes sense, right? Because that's how trees work. Um, they're like pretty chunky at the bottom, and then they just taper down to like the top. So that's really good. Um, let me see. But you had like a couple of questions here, though. So, does the bark, the exposed areas from the dead wood on the tree, feel balanced? What do you mean with balanced?
Like, is there too much dead wood showing? That's sort of what I'm concerned about. Like, is not enough covered?
Hmm. It comes down to basically what we said with Justin as well, right? Like it comes down to like how you balance the two. Like if one is gonna be from a distance, if it's gonna read like it's like natural bark and it doesn't have like a lot of noise on it, and then you have like almost a splintered like dead wood like underneath that is gonna be like heavy in visual noise, you have to find a way to balance the two, right? Because then we're adding we're contrasting like rest versus noise again. Um Currently, I think you can definitely like condense certain areas. So for example, the area here that is exposed, I would just say like pick some areas where stuff is like really broken and splintered, and then just go with like the general flow that you already have. Because yeah, it could look really nice if we just like condense the area to, hey, this is like the really fucked up bit of the tree, and then the rest of it is still fucked up, but it's not going to be like a visual like eyesore, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So you just have like a balance between generic damage and then like let's call it like really unique damage. And this applies to a lot of stuff in games, right? This applies to whenever you're texturing, like you can't apply like a unique or like a uniform noise on top of the whole texture because that's going to be very distracting. So the same with the battle with Justin, right? We kind of have to find ways to like allow for areas of rest so that the other areas like pique our interest a little bit more, because otherwise it's going to be very hard for our eyes to decide like, oh, where do I look? And at a certain point that's going to confuse us as well. So that would be just something to think about as you're doing this. But overall it looks really nice. What's your plan for the texturing then? Are you going to bake this down onto the tree?
So I plan on baking it in Painter and then actually taking it over to 3D Coat to have some hand painted texture on top of that.
Okay. So have you thought about what we discussed, I think last week? Like the workflow that you're going to be using for this?
Pardon, could you repeat that again? Sorry.
No worries. So last time we discussed like the workflow that is common in games to texture really big stuff, right? This is a tree that is going to be, I don't know, how tall is it? Like 100 meters?
Yeah, about.
So let's average it to like 100 meters, right, to make it simple. Um, there's this concept called like texel density, which is going to be really important for like consistency between like different assets like in our scene, so that one doesn't look like really blurry and one doesn't look like really detailed, right? Because that's going to break the illusion of a virtual world. Um, that's why on trees, like if you look at really big ones, they try a whole bunch of techniques with just tilables to make that work. Because otherwise, like for example, if you we're going to make this really simple, right? Pixel density is usually expressed in a measurement of pixels per meter. So for a simple measurement, let's say we have 1024 pixels per meter, right? So like a 1K texture that we can allocate per meter that we have in our game. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
So That means that if we do that, which is like a very common measurement, like having like a 1K map for a 1 meter surface, that means that we have to have a texture that doesn't even measure, that is like really not even usable in games for to texture this tree, right? So we can't texture that with just like a unique texture, because that's going to look really blurry.
Okay, okay.
So that's what we kind of talked about last week in terms of there is a way that you could go about this where you still use a unique bake and then you layer additional detail normals on top of it as well to kind of simulate that it has more texture detail than it has, right? So rocks and like big cliff formations, they all do this. They basically have like a unique normal, which is basically going to be under texel density, right? So it's going to look blurry. But then we hide the fact that it's blurry by adding like detail normals on top of it that are tileable detail normals, right? So they just have like a tiling looking stone normal, and we didn't add that on top of it to kind of make it seem more detailed than it actually is. So we can do the same thing here by going for like a bark tileable and then adding that tileable on top of our unique bake in the hope that that's going to be enough. But that's what you're going to find out, you know? Well, we'll have to put that to the test.
Yeah, I'll definitely be testing that out this week for texturing.
Yeah, because I would honestly say the state that you got the tree in right now, just try to get it into the game and see how it looks. Because that might dictate like what you're going to do in the future, right?
All right.
And that is again like a pretty common thing that we do, right? Like if we're unsure or if we're trying to do something new, what we tend to do is we do like a vertical slice or a benchmark, and we say like, hey, we're not sure if this is gonna work, so we're gonna push for the quickest answer to that question. So in this case, you've already got like the tree kind of like textured, right, or like kind of sculpted. I would say just decimate it, bake it down onto that decimated version, get that into the engine, and see how that looks. And then you can kind of figure out like the next steps.
All right.
So that would mean we got a base normal, we got a detail normal. That's going to be on top of it as well. And then, yeah, with everything, right? Like test as soon as possible. With literally anything. But especially with things that you're unsure about. Cool. I know that it was like a bunch of technical mumbo jumbo. Was that all clear?
Yes, that was all clear.
Okay, that's good. Cool. Is there something else that I can help with as well?
No, I think that answers like 2 of the questions, and the second one was just about the flow of the bark, honestly.
And what would that be? So,
Like
said the flow of
the like on the main bend, the first bend, I showed it to a friend and they thought it felt too sharp. But I was wondering if I could get your input on that.
Yeah, I'm gonna say the same thing. Get it into the engine, because what is gonna happen is your texture is not gonna have enough resolution to make it even look as sharp as it does in ZBrush. So by just the nature of the texture resolution not being enough, it's already going to smooth out a lot of details, and it might not even like this is the thing why you want to test early, right? It might not even show like all the nicely sculpted details that you're trying to incorporate into the tree right now. So that's why test it and see how it looks in the actual engine. All right. There are ways that you could increase the texel density by using multiple textures. You can still do that. Um, but it's not a thing that I would necessarily recommend for like a giant tree. That's not necessarily how we would do it in games. But you can do it. If you're like at a certain
All right.
point, you're like, ooh, I'm not sure how I need to do like all this technical mumbo jumbo that we talked about. You can then just try it with like multiple texture sets to like multiple textures and just basically split up the tree in multiple sections. Like maybe each branch is like a separate texture or something.
Okay.
So that would be another option.
All right, cool. And I think that's all I have for today.
Nice one. A great update, that. Thank you so much for coming on, buddy. Lovely to talk to you as always. And yeah, best of luck, man.
Have a good day.
See you next week. Do that. I know sometimes we go off a cliff when it comes to like the technical stuff here, but it is a core. What is it? It's a core skill of an environment artist to know which workflow you have to use in which situation. But that happens over time, right? I mean, I was recently invited onto like a podcast, and we were talking about like my first game experience working on Planet Coaster. And I was really open because I didn't even know like about trim sheets and all that kind of stuff when I got started, right? I learned all that stuff on the job. So you're not expected to know everything, but yeah, this stuff, like if this is on the portfolio, you would definitely get questions about like, oh, what type of workflow did you use to do such a big thing? Because it is so unique and it's such a technical challenge. That is definitely going to come up. So option 2 is split into more meshes. That will be option 2. Let's see. VLCG Art is saying texturing something at such a big scale is a challenge, especially make it look good from afar, but also mid and close range. Well, yeah, that's why. So Shazar brought it up as well. That was my first recommendation, right? With like a tileable and a detail normal, it gives you that flexibility to then do some like really cool trickery with like fading out the detail normal or scaling up the detail normal depending on the range that you're looking at the whole thing. So you could. This is a very common technique when it comes to terrains, for example. If you're on a mountain in a game and you're looking at like the terrain, that terrain has a macro variation map. So it's basically a huge texture that is just projected onto the whole terrain. And it kind of gives it like a variation that is only seen from a large distance. Because once you get closer, it kind of fades it out and it swaps it for like a mid-range one. And then as you get closer to the terrain, it swaps it out for like a detail one. So it kind of has like a bunch of those like layers built in. That could potentially be something, like a technique to look into when it comes to like a really big object like this, but it does require like technical setup to do so. You know? And again, not required for an environment artist to know all this stuff, right? Because that gets really complex. Yes, let's have a look. So let's move on to Malte. Where's Malte in the list? There we go. Oh, sorry for the long questions. Yeah, Malte, come on, why are you doing this to me, buddy? How does the lighting look now with the new additions? The fog, the water reflections, cube map, and HDRI. I'm mainly worried about it being too purple. I mean, like I said before, right? Like in the last meeting that we had, it's just the focus still goes towards the back, right? So that is still something that is present, and that would still be something that you want to solve for. As for the windows, I added a with and without image to show the vignette. Okay, so this has a vignette. That one doesn't. Need to go back and make a proper texture for it though. I was wondering if it's not visible enough or too intense at the moment. So Well, see, this is always a tricky thing, right? Like if you call it out, I will definitely say like it's too intense, but if you didn't call it out, I would probably not notice as much. So that's the trickery as well, right? Like if you're not sure, do a blend between the two, or just do like 50% of what you have now, and then it's good. Honestly, in terms of like what you still have to do on the tool and the environment and all that kind of stuff, like just having like a shadow on the windows right now, when in a realistic situation, you're going to be looking at it from at least like 10 meters or 20 meters away, that shadow is not going to matter as much as you think it does right now. So I would honestly, for now, set it at 50% and then move on to the bigger stuff that you have to do. Because we're getting a little bit carried away with the details. So 50% from this. Because again, yeah, you're only going to see it from a distance. Let's see. Quick question. Do you think the bottom part I added a shutter works, or should I spend more time to make it feel like more 3D? Again, same thing. You're looking at it from such a distance that bottom part is not going to matter as much as you think it does. If you look at the ones in Spider-Man, for example, because I know that they have like breakdowns and zoomed in shots and all that kind of stuff, it's probably not going to be as impressive as you would imagine it to, because you're flying through a world by like 1,000 miles an hour. Like, no one's going to notice that, right? It kind of needs to hold up, but also, yeah. I think it's enough for now. Last question. Do you have any tips on how to work with reflections in Unreal Engine 5? I've been struggling quite a bit with noise and flickering, both with lumen and screen space. I had refraction and tried translucency on the windows, but it makes the shader way too heavy. Yep. Well, have fun, especially with glass. Yeah. Have fun with that. I'm honestly... So I'll tell you the straight up thing, right? Like, so the thing that we did for our asset pack that we did, like the Manila inspired asset pack that we did with a small team like a year ago, we honestly avoided translucency at all costs. So what we did, we just faked it. So we had like these like see-through like big water jugs. I just faked it with Fresnel, because transparency was just like way too costly, and you have to deal with the alpha sorting of it too, which is just like freaking annoying. And even the vertex sorting algorithm that they have to determine like which layer is in front of which layer, even the new one just didn't look as good as we imagined it to do. It was experimental at that point, but yeah. That's why, if you really start thinking about it, like that's why games like usually stay away from a lot of transparency and a lot of glass and all that kind of stuff. Or they just really fake it, right? Shazar is saying, as far as I know, gameplay Resident Evil Village doesn't have translucency in real time. Yeah. When we were working on Far Cry, like I mean, I wasn't involved with this, right? But I know that we only had glass, like actual glass on the car windows. And there might be some other stuff there as well. But that's the one that I knew of, right? Because you can't get away with a car that doesn't have like car windows, right? So you need glass there. But otherwise, like most of the buildings just didn't have windows, right? And if they did, there's probably some fakery involved with that as well. Yeah, glass is usually avoided. So you kind of have to fake it, right? Like with like a cube map or something like that you can like use as a reflection that then gets used that way. But then we're getting really technical. So that is honestly not my wheelhouse. That is too specific. I would say best of luck in the research. There's a couple of workshops that we've done. There's one with Karim Yasir. That was one that recently came out, and he talks about like a whole bunch of things that have to do with like lumen and all that kind of stuff. But even though he didn't talk about transparency, maybe there's something in there that can help. So yeah. Let's see. So yeah, that is just like too too technically deep dive for me, right? Like I can only point you in like the right direction of just like a couple of things here and there, but that's about it. Thank you, Malte. Kazuki is up next. By the way, just a reminder, if you're in the chat and you are a you are a part of like Whip Wednesday and you want to come onto the stage, feel free to join me in the event room on our Discord. We can have a little chat. Kazuki has entered the chat. Feel free to raise your hand and we'll bring you up to the stage. Oop, there we go. Hello, Kazuki.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Doing good. Good to see you. You're
Awesome.
getting close to finishing this project then, huh?
Yeah, would say like this is pretty much it. I have to turn it in on Saturday, so now I just want to know like what I did right, what I could do better, and how I should present it, because I would like to put this on my portfolio.
Yeah, we're gonna stick with the presentation, right? So are these the final ones that you're trying to present? So we got like a wireframe, a trim sheet breakdown, and then like the assets, right? Those are like the main presentations.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So when it comes to presentations, trying to think about like the information that you're trying to display and if the way that you're displaying it is the most effective way of doing so. For example, when it comes to the wireframe, I mean, I've got it in like pretty low res. Let's see. Like all the parts that I want to see on the wireframe, I cannot see. Just because the wireframe is so dense that it just turns into like a blurry mess of just blue, right?
Right.
So a more effective way is then take this into like an external program and then render like a wireframe in there, right? Or maybe do some post-processing by yourself by, I don't know, like overlaying multiple images or something like that. But yeah, the core comes down to if you're doing a presentation and you're doing a breakdown, you kind of want to have the most effective way of showcasing the information that you want to display.
Okay. Would it be better to do it in something like Marmoset, or can I show it in Maya as well?
Marmoset is probably going to be the better option just in terms of setup and also the way that it renders wireframes, because I know that Maya, you can probably make it look good as well, but it's not as intuitive as Marmoset from what I know,
Okay.
right? So yeah. And also make it keep it exciting, right? Like for these breakdowns, everyone and their dog does like the the gray like bottom of the level and then just puts their stuff on it and that's it, right? That's like entry level presentation. What I would do in your case is just use the environment, right? You have like a pretty big open space here. I would honestly just like remove all the clutter, have like a landscape with maybe like a little bit of landscape painting on it, and then use that as a base to do the presentation on, right? That's the way that I would do it.
Okay.
There are other ways of doing it. For example, using like a color box. That is something that I did for like our presentation when we did like the asset pack. And that would actually mean you take like a rounded cube and you use the insides rather than the outside. So you basically flip the normals, you cut up the top so that light can come into it. And then you use that to do like your presentations. And what you'll end up with is something like let me see if I can find it quickly.
Is it like the dome in Maya?
Could be. Been ages since I used Maya, so.
Okay.
It's basically like a beveled cube.
Yeah.
Oh, there's no way that I'm gonna find this in time. Oh, I can actually just go to the listing probably. Here we go. So this is stuff that I done for like the renders for RPack. And it basically just gives you like a nice gradient, but you can still render everything in like Unreal Engine. It just gives you like a nice smooth gradient when it comes to the background. Yeah. Something like that can work. Let me see. Yeah. Something like that could potentially work as well. Especially for breakdowns. Just something, right? I think in your case, it would make more sense to go for like the actual environment and to use that.
Okay.
Because it is there. And the environment itself, like if you just like remove all the stuff that you've done on top of the terrain and just maybe keep like a couple of pebbles and sticks and all that kind of stuff, you can then just use that as a base.
Yeah. Okay.
So, let's see. So, first thing that we talked about was the information of the, well, information versus presentation, right? That's basically the main topic that we talked about. You still want to use like all your artistic skills to kind of make it like really exciting, while making sure that the information that people want comes out of there as well. So for example, with the wireframe, and I'm gonna keep it like pretty short, but there's a bunch of portfolio reviews that I've done that basically always talk about this stuff, right? If you have the wireframe, add like the amount of polygons that it has, right? Like the poly count. If you're, what I do like that you're doing is that you're already relating the textures to the actual object. So that is pretty good, because now I can see like, oh, this is the trim sheet that you use to texture like the whole thing with. So that is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
In this case, what I would do, pick your best looking object that you spend the most time on and is probably like the best optimized. Pick that and do it as like a separate call out where you say like, hey, you basically do it just in just like one image where you have the object by itself. You maybe do like a wireframe render, and then you do a breakdown of like the UVs and like how you did the UVs, plus like the poly count as well. Because that one image contains so much value that you can easily convince people with like, okay, this person knows how to, first of all, make an asset, make it look good, and also optimize it and make sure that like the UVs and the textures are really good, right? So
Yeah.
that is all stuff, like basically the breakdowns and all the stuff that you add there, you're trying to sell like your skill set towards like someone that is looking at your work, right? So yeah.
So I could just choose the temple and just do the breakdown of the temple with the trim sheet and the UVs, and that would be enough. I don't have to do it for every asset, because I was thinking I could be shooting myself in the foot by showing, for example, the mask where I didn't take the time to do the retopology, and I think it's a bit high resolution as well.
Yeah, so that is the thing where you have to choice, right? The temple is good, but it shows a different workflow, right? The temple uses trim sheets, where what I'm trying to go for is I want to show your diversity in skill set. So that means that, okay, this person can use a trim sheet and make like a whole building with it. That's cool. Can they also do unique assets as well? Because there's a bunch of unique assets in here. I think it's honestly worth doing the retopology. It might even be worth like going through the paces, making it look really good, and then putting that on your portfolio as well.
Okay.
Because then, if you look at it from the outside, right, then you have one workflow that showcases that you can do buildings and like really large stuff by using pre-existing assets, right? Which is like a trim sheet or tilables or whatever. But then you can also come in and make a unique asset as well if you need to. So it's kind of showing that you're like you have versatility in your skill set,
Okay.
and that you're both comfortable in doing so. Okay. Is there anything else that I can help with?
No, that's great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah. Great work, man.
Thank you so
great
much.
work. You were, I think, in there was like, hey, maybe some last things that you could do to the project, or was that more just like focusing on the presentation?
Yeah, you had told me to add like the mask and some statues, so I decided to add like the fox statue with the head in the ground, and I thought that could make it really interesting. And I also added the mask in the top to the front.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
And the fence, and I did some vertex painting to add some moss and dirt as well.
Yep. Yeah. Nice one, man. Okay, cool. I would say best of luck with handing this in.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your help.
No worries.
Sorry for the dog.
It's all good. It's all good. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for coming on again. And yeah, like I said, best of luck with handing it in, and keep us in the loop, man.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Kazuki. We'll talk later. Thanks for coming on again.
Thank you.
Sweet. Kazuki, thanks for coming on. Best of luck with handing it in again. Cool. Let's jump on to the next person. The doggo says bye too. Yeah. It did. Excited doggo in the background, cheering him on. Cool. So next person in the list, Cody. Let's have a look. Getting close to being finished with this project. Right now I have some cube maps. Skipping through like all this stuff. I would like to hear any feedback you have on the scene in general, composition, storytelling, lighting, any ideas you might have. I'm here for it. Okay, we're gonna see if we can say something about it. A couple of quick things perhaps. Because, you know, I'm not a big fan of just like, give me any feedback in general. It's just too open of a question. Let's see if we can call out some stuff. Directionality of the decals, right, is still happening. That still looks a little bit weird. Again, like last time we discussed, like if you do that, like it kind of makes sense if you do it consistently, right? But having the one-off kind of feels like an issue. The same thing happens when you're when you like want to rotate something, right? To kind of make it look like it's been messed up or like it looks off. You don't rotate it by like two degrees because then it looks like an issue on your end, or you made that mistake. You want to do things like more deliberately. See, loving the chaos on the ground. That is looking pretty cool. What could be more interesting is having more of them still like stacked in the box though. Because I usually refer to this by like cause and effect, right? We want to see like, hey, this is where they came from and this is where they ended up, right? And then maybe have like a couple more boxes just like stacked to the side here that are just like empty or something like that, right? Kind of lean into like the chaos like you're already kind of doing here. It'd be really cool. And then you just have like all the stuff scattered on the floor. So we're taking your stuff, like the basically the things that you've already done, and we're just taking it to the next level, right? We're exaggerating what is happening here. But I do really like it though. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we cleaned up like the bottom area, which is looking quite nice. I am not a fan of these additional points though. They are too bright. I would honestly hide them around the corner. Not even hide them around the corner, because then it's gonna look weird that you have just like a weird green glow coming from like the back of it. I would honestly have like a very subtle light that just adds like a little bit of fill in this area. And that's about it. I think the green is like very distracting at this point. So I would probably get rid of that, especially when it does this, when it's so bright that it just like competes with like your other more important like focal point. So balancing those out is going to be nice. Like the red light, right? Like the red light by itself, it doesn't take up like a lot of your attention because it isn't as bright as the main light that we have in the background. Yeah, rest of it is looking really nice. There's probably like some very subtle stuff that you can do in just making sure that we highlight. Because what I do like, right? Like I do like the way that you've added like this light, and it kind of feels like, hey, this is the most important area. It's like nicely highlighting that whole area. But if you go for like the more zoomed in shots, like the strength of the lighting, like I'm expecting to be pulled here, right? But it kind of just like washes out and it's not like direct enough. And again, something very subtle can do, right? Like just like a subtle fill light that can just like light up like this space a little bit more can help a lot as well. You can also potentially do that in post with a vignette as well. But yeah, maybe a combination of the two. Feel free to experiment. That could work. But yeah, we're getting onto like the home stretch of this. I think if you want to have some lights instead of like the green stuff, reuse this little light that you have going, you know? Have like a little light here, and it just casts like a little bit of a fill. Just like a very subtle. Very subtle fill light. That can be enough. Yeah. Great stuff, Cody. Thanks for showing up again. Nearing to the finish line, so I'm curious to see like the final thing, and all the breakdowns and stuff is gonna look sick. Great work. Falco is saying, hey, do you think it's a good idea to show the UVs? I've heard very experienced artists say it's not necessary, and it's usually hard to impress them with, but very easy to mess them up. So it kind of depends on who's sitting on the opposite end of the recruitment table, right? Because if I look at someone's UVs, I'm not gonna crack down on those UVs and say like, hey, there's only like, I don't know, like a 92% like fill rate. Like you need to have at least like 95, you know, like what are you doing? Or the padding is off for like 2 pixels. That's not what it's about to me. It's more about like showing a base understanding of like, hey, do you know how to like optimize like your, it's resource management, right? That's what it comes down to. It's like, do you know how to optimize like your UV space to a certain degree that with like a little bit of tweaks here and there, we can tweak whatever needs to happen, right? What you don't want to do is, or like the worst case scenario is if you're like overly confident and you just share like a UV that doesn't even occupy like half of the space because you were focusing too much on like texel density or whatever, right? As like a weird example. Then we know that is like a fundamental misunderstanding. So I think that's why I would still be an advocate of having your UVs on there, because it is always better to show, at least in my opinion, it's always better to show all the information than to have to explain it, or maybe even run the risk of someone else showing like all that they can do and outcompeting you, right? So that's the way that I kind of approach, like that's my approach when it comes to portfolio presentation, is you just put all the stuff that you're confident about, you put that on the table. Just everything. Because then it is whatever they can come up with. If they look at like the final artwork and they're like, I wonder how they did this. And they can scroll down and they're like, oh, that's how they did it. That's pretty cool. Like, you are going to run into those situations as well, where they're more excited to bring you on because they also know that you're like really open about your work and you love sharing what you do as well. And you're not afraid to like share stuff, even if there might be minor mistakes in it. Because I'll tell you the other thing, if you don't show it and you really messed up, they're gonna figure it out in the recruitment process or in the art test anyway. So doesn't matter. But yeah, everyone kind of has like their own philosophy and their own opinion on it, right? So that's why I keep saying that that's my opinion on it. And I think the majority of the artists that are looking at portfolios, they will probably have a view similar to that, because they know that like if you fuck up your padding on your UVs, that is super easy to fix, right? Even though it's like a wrong thing, it's super easy to fix. If you don't know that you can, I don't know, yeah, if you're not making like maximized use out of your UVs, that is like relatively easy to fix. However, yeah, the fundamental stuff, if you only fill up like half your UV space, then we're talking about issues. Yeah, thank you for the question though, Falco. That's a really good question. Book Studio, it's my turn. How dare you? You're not even in the list. Cheater. Let's see, who's next? So, Alexander. Where is Alexander? List. Oh my god, they're still named differently. Oh no. Here we go. So, long time no see. I decided to put that big scene on hold. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we can just move on from that. It would take a while to finish, and time is something that I don't have anymore. My baby was born. Yay, congratulations. I'm thinking of making a diorama with them. Something like a temple terrace or like a lookout or something like that. Yeah, I mean, that's a good idea. In terms of like making a diorama, try to think about the format a little bit more, right? So you kind of have a really wide format where if you look at most, or what is mostly like a pleasing, what would you even say, like format for dioramas, is just they kind of have like some sort of roundedness to them, right? So like usually you'll see something like, I don't know, something like this, you know? Maybe something that looks like less like a turd, but hey, you know where we're going. Shit. No matter what I do. Dang it. Okay. It looks like this, but less poo-like, trust me. But if we distill this down, oh my god, so horrendous. This is one of those moments where I wonder if I'm actually an artist, you know? But if we really look at this, if we distill this down, right? Like something that's round, it has like a rounded shape to it, makes for a more interesting read. The second part is also, usually they're constructed with like a triangular composition. And you have the start of that, right? But then there's nothing in between. If this had, so if we're doing an exercise here, right? If this had like, I don't know, like a statue, right? Now we're looking at something that's like more interesting by itself already. And then we can start filling up like these gaps with maybe like, oh, there's a broken pillar here. Or wait. No. We're going to change the base shape a little bit. The balconies are going to be a little bit broken, and then we're going to change base shape to be a little bit more rounded. And then we can introduce like all these patterns on the side to start like breaking it up a little bit more. Right? And then we're going to break that up as well. Gonna do the same thing here. Right, and this becomes more interesting. Because we've incorporated like the same sort of elements, right? I don't really see what's going on anymore, but so that's what I would focus on. Like filling up the space more meaningfully, right? By not making it like a boring shape, but actually adding like to the shape and making it more dynamic than something that is just a square that's kind of laid out. And then also having like a triangular composition that you have this like build up that kind of builds up towards something in the middle, right? Doesn't have to be a statue, can be something else. You can break up the pillars, you can have a collection of urns, like whatever, right? It can be like a pilgrimage place, right? Like I'm thinking that like all the way in the beginning, we kind of had this idea that this environment was going to be like a sacred place, right? So having like a place where like this is where they finish the pilgrimage and where they make their sacrifice or something like that, right? You can have something like that or leave a gift or whatever. An arch, whatever, right? Like it can work. So there's something that is like bigger so that is the point of focus compared to what is happening currently. Yeah. It turns out a good silhouette in a diorama isn't as easy as I thought. Yeah, because the thing is, like, we cannot rely on having a bigger environment to make up for some of the flaws that we might have, right? That is a beautiful thing about like having a bigger environment is that you can kind of hide the stuff that you're not necessarily that good at, because there's so much to look at usually. Whereas in a diorama, it comes down to like the detailed stuff that is more refined. So yeah, think about that. You got some good ideas, you know? The temple terrace, maybe a lookout temple, something like that. Think about it in those terms, right? Like what could be cool is that the pillars are actually just like the structural pillars that still have a roof, but like the roof is like half like broken up or something like that. And then you build like a diorama in that. But then it becomes like more interesting to look at as a whole. Yeah. Play around. Don't restrict yourself to like the stuff that you already made and focus on like a good composition first. Yeah. Say best of luck, Alexander. Let's see. Yeah. Cool. Best of luck. Let's move on to Jordan. Jordan, where are you in the list? I love general feedback. Sorry, we're not going to do general feedback for this one. Like, we're kind of on like a tight budget when it comes to time. I'm feeling like the landscape more realistic style isn't fitting with the unique Heil style. Do you feel the same? Not sure how to handle that. My main for this project was to get away with one trim sheet for the architecture and invert blending RGB channels in between the snow and other materials. Okay, that's cool. I mean, you can still do that though. But on the style of... Yeah, there is some sort of a disconnect here happening, right? Where it's usually it comes down to the amount of like textural detail that you put into a place. So you have like all the rocks and they kind of look like really realistic. Might even be like mega scans or something like that, right? I'm not too sure. Or the way that you texture them is just more realistic. So you have to add those like textural layers also on top of this with like some more noise on like the masks and all that kind of stuff. Because what is also happening is you have like snow that's happening on here. You have like snow that's happening on here. Like this mask feels really soft. Right? Especially compared to what we're seeing here. There's more detail. In the snow. So the comparison between the two. And just like the general noise that you get, right? Like the general like textural noise that you get from the floor compared to like how what's the best word? How mundane or how singular like the wood is, for example. It's just missing that like snow pileup and that textural detail to kind of massage the two together, right? Because now we have a transition coming from like, oh, it's snow everywhere, but it's also like, oh, pristine planks behind it. So we need to not merge, we need to blend those surfaces. Right? So some sort of consistency in the mass that we're using. And then also, yeah, blending all the surfaces together as well. That's going to help a lot too. And yeah, making sure that like the texture layers are aligned. But they need to feel the same. Sit down for a second. But yeah, just another reminder for people that are here for their first Whip Wednesday. If you are here, please say hi in the chat. You know, that at least I can then focus on the people that are here first. Kind of include you more. But if you want to, you can join me on stage as well, like inside of the Discord too. Feel free to hop into the event room, join me on stage if you're comfortable with that. Because I think we had some people here that hello, Jimmy turned around. Are you both in Whip Wednesday for today? Yeah, it's good to see you, George. It's good to see you. How have you been? I don't think George is in the list. I've not seen your name, so. No, just watching. Awesome. Yeah, cool. So let's see. I like the pops of red. Yeah, the pops of red actually work really nice. Especially because they're more focused on the building now, right? They kind of add some consistency between everything. Let's see, was there anything else before we move on to the next person? So my main goal for this project, yeah, the trim sheets. Okay. So I guess that's it, right? You need to find a way to massage all the surfaces together by using snow, snow decals, like blending, whatever you need to do just blending it all together as well, so that this house currently just feels like it's just like plonk on top of the snow, like it's brand new almost, you know, apart from the roof, of course. But yeah, I think that's gonna help a lot. Cool. But thanks, Jordy. Thank you for sharing your work. But yeah, I mean, I skip over it all the time, right? Because I'm so focused on the feedback. But that stuff was looking really good, Jordy. Like, nice looking upgrades. Also, the way that you've handled like the door inset with like the thing hanging underneath it looks really cool. It is Connor. Connor, do you want to come onto the stage? I don't know. Where do I have you? Oh, I'm getting confused with the names again. Hold on. Let me... Oh, okay. There we go. Shit. Do I not have you? Oh, there we go. Fatal potatoes. Oh my god. There we go. Hello, Connor.
Hello, hello. How's it going, Tim?
Good, Connor. How are you? Doing good?
I'm doing pretty good. Got a snow day, so no work.
Oh, I want snow. Oh, I'm jealous.
You can have it.
Yeah, you don't want it anymore?
I'm done with it.
Are you like in a Nordic country or Canada or something like that?
No, Midwest U.S., so it just like comes blasting down.
Oh shit. Well, yeah, send some over, man. Would love it.
Of course.
We
I'll
only
do my best.
We only get freaking sludge, man. Oh, so horrendous.
Oh, that's the worst kind.
Yep. Yeah. We don't even get to enjoy our snow. Like we get it for like one day, and then the rest of it is just like fucking mud and sludge. So, ugh, gross.
Snowball fights are not the same.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Cool, man. So, what happened? Give me an introduction. What did you do since last week?
Okay, so basically I've just been sculpting a bunch, so I'm just kind of doing the composition stuff, like as I think of things. But right now, like if you do a squint test on this, those lights, the emissives are like way like just overbearing in the composition. So I'm trying to come up with ways to balance everything out. I'm kind of thinking of moving like all the trees and the buildings and like the bridge to the left more to open up the sky to add like a area of visual rest coming down there with the sky, and then maybe moving the sunset back there, which will change all my like dark to light transitions of the scene, but I can just deal with that.
So I don't think like it's like a necessarily like a compositional issue in terms of like the placement of assets, right? I think right now the biggest issue is just the lighting itself. Like you've got this like intense blood red like volumetric fog, and then you've got like really bright white like lights on the actual carousel, and it just feels like really unnatural at this point.
It's fair.
So I think sometimes what I do when I struggle with lighting is I'll just eat the setup, you know. I'll start from scratch, and sometimes that helps because sometimes I get so lost in the weeds when it comes to like all the settings that you have to keep in balance, and then you, I don't know, fuck something up or something.
I think I did with the fog. It went away, and then I tried to get it back, and it's never looked right since.
Oh, see, so that might be an indication that potentially just like start from scratch. Not the whole thing, right? Like just the lighting, because the lighting is like really easy to set up when you have like Unreal Engine has like this built-in like lighting manager tool where you can just like add everything in, and it's just like one window for like everything. So that could be interesting to check out for you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely do that. So do you think like there would be a need for some other light sources? I was thinking like maybe because I still want like the depth of the scene, you know. So I was thinking of maybe doing like I don't know, because you know it's post-apocalyptic stuff happening, like maybe like a fire going on in the city, you know, you just see an orange light, but like to give it like that little bit of depth.
That depends on you, like honestly, because I can see this working in like the middle of the night where you just have like a faint moonlight just lighting up like the whole scene. That could also work, because that sort of makes it easier in terms of like what you want to do, right? And then you can still implement like your idea into it, where you say, "Hey, it's going to be in the middle of the night. Basically, the whole scene is going to be like faintly lit up by moonlight." And then if you still want to have a fire in the back or something like that, you can balance it with like the light in the foreground. Then you only have to balance like two lights instead of then also keeping in mind like the sunlight and all that kind of stuff as well, right? So
Yeah.
that makes it easier.
Yeah.
And it also kind of helps reinforce like the storytelling as well, right? Like um
Yeah.
the horror kind of atmosphere, because I mean it's a cliche, but that's the reason why most of the stuff like in horror movies happens at night, right? Because it's just scarier when something happens in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I was hoping to like keep like a lot of the shape language with it, because like if I'm doing like soft moonlight, I'm probably just gonna have to be doing like a lot of fill, like small like fill lights, just to allow the shapes to be readable.
Not
But I
necessarily.
like it.
You can do it with like just basically if you want to fake it, you just like you set your like sun to like a really low intensity and set it to like blue instead of like orange, and you kind of have something already, right? I would probably try that out.
Okay.
And then you can probably position it like somewhere on the back right or something like that to like highlight the silhouettes of like the trees and the buildings and all that kind of stuff, like a little bit more.
To backlight it a bit.
Yeah, you could potentially do that.
Okay.
That could work.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm mainly just been sculpting, so this
Mhm.
is I don't have too much on this, but thank you for your input. I'll let you move on.
Yeah, no worries, man. Thank you for coming on and sharing this with us as well.
Of course, thank you. I really enjoy Whip Wednesdays.
Hey, thanks, man. That's awesome. Glad to hear it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the sculpts, man. I think the sculpts you're talking about are for like the carousel itself, right? Like we talked about last week.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
It's I've mainly done like rock sculpts in the past, so this is like kind of new, so I'm kind of just iterating a bunch.
Yep. Yep. Cool stuff, man. I would say best of luck. Yeah, I'm looking
Awesome.
forward to seeing them.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Connor. Swan. Thanks so much for coming on, Connor. That was awesome. Small little updates. I appreciate it. Let's see. The top half of the image is fine. The bottom half could be darker or bluer below the rim of the canopy. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of like just like the intense red, right? It kind of feels like it is almost like an over the top like horror movie kind of vibe that we're getting, but it's not really serious anymore at this point. But your point on the emissives agent are really good though. Like I think Connor will appreciate that. Just like have some emissives that are like flickering, maybe some of them are like half lights, and seeing it all like animated and come to life is going to be really, really cool. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, thank you for sharing your work, Connor. Snow day in Nebraska, says Swan Boy. Oh man, I'm jealous of all this fucking snow. Ugh, we just have the cold, but no snow. Dylan is currently at work, so I won't be able to join live. Oh, Dylan, wrong priorities, man. How dare you? I mean, I understand. Let's keep moving on. Where were we? So we looked at Justin already. Let's look at Luis's work. Luis is new to the community, so first of all, thank you for joining the community and welcome. Is it Luis or Luis? I'm not too sure. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Let's see. Determine 4 cameras for rendering the images. Oh, do we have? See. If you want to raise your hand, we can bring you up to the stage. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Hello, Luis. How are you doing?
How are you? I'm good. Right now is nearly 10 in the UK.
Oh yeah. I'm in the UK as well.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. No
Yeah.
snow then.
Nah, no snow, unfortunately. Ugh. I'm hoping though. Like I mean, we're the end of February, so like hope is kind of fading. But come on, give me like a couple days. You know, that's all I asked for.
I mean, it's like few days in Manchester, but just a few, like
Oh.
just like lasting for like 1 or 2 days. Nothing more.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, we had one over here as well, but it was literally just like one day and then it was over. And I was like, no, give me more, please.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Cool. But you've been working on 4 different cameras for rendering images on your current work in progress, right? Like, what can I help with
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, basically, I'm working this for like maybe on and off like 2 months, and then I really want to do like these pieces for my portfolio
Mm-hmm.
because like, and then like I really focus on the lighting and the composition as well. But of course, like the assets I make by myself as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
really want to show some skill of I can like do anything by myself, but at the meantime, because like as you can see, like in this sense it's like an old-fashioned Asian restaurant, and then
Yeah.
I want to do like a mysteries, dangerous, some places in unsafe, and then but when I'm go really deep down of this, I feel like it's still like missing something in the scenes, like I
Mm.
mean, I try to put a lot of stuff into it, but it doesn't like it doesn't like feel unsafe. Or maybe I put a lot of effort on the lighting, feel more like a warm and a cold tone, like mixing up together. Look, it's more like a lot of feelings in the scenes, but for in general feelings, I don't think that like the set dressing is not enough for me. Or
Yeah.
maybe it's not enough messy.
Mm.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's just like you do it like more longer on the project, you feel like you're losing some like instance on the project, you
Yeah,
know?
you just lose touch with it, right? Like it's kind of hard
Yeah,
to see the forest from the trees at a certain point because you're so close to it all the time. Um,
yeah,
no, cool. Just picking up on what you said there. First of all, I love the lighting. I love that you're trying to like blend like all these different kinds of lights, and I'm kind of getting like a really cool vibe from it already, which is really nice. Um, I do think what we can do is we need to find a way to focus the lighting a little bit more. So that would be
yeah,
the first note. So focusing the lighting on a certain part of the scene. And that will bring me to the second point. Because if we focus the lighting somewhere, we want to give the viewer something to focus on, right? So, like Agents is saying, is like we're kind of missing like a focal point. And this goes really well together with what you said about like you kind of want to integrate a story, but you don't know how it feels yet. I would honestly use or make a focal point that has to do something with a story. So in this case,
yeah,
you've kind of tried to nail a vibe, right? And I think the vibe is there, but I think what is missing is what is our emotional connection to the space? Like why does it feel unsafe? Like is there maybe someone doing like shady deals, right? Or maybe someone got murdered or whatever the story is that you want to come up with that makes it feel unsafe, you need to try and visualize that in like a more concrete way than is currently happening. And you can do that with set dressing by making like a couple more assets. And I don't know, there's some spaces in Cyberpunk that I think about where it's like a half abandoned building with just uh like an old moldy chair, but still there's like half opened and like half consumed like beer cans next to it, indicating that this is like a half abandoned building, but it's still occupied by someone. You kind of need to find um what your take on that is going to be, like on the story itself.
Yeah, I mean, in initial idea of this project is if you can go up to the left hand corner of the picture,
Mhm.
you can see like there is a very open window outside. Initially the idea is there's a monster outside and there's a gigantic eyes looking into the scenes, but
Mm.
and I realized that that is too much effort to making that monster. And then because like in I mean, like in my initial idea as well, like the monster, the only light source is from the monster eyes. But I
Mm.
think that would be really less like, because like I think that is a in imitations of the lighting, because like in Lumen I can't only just using one light source from the eyes to like bring to bright up the whole environment.
Yep.
And because I want to show my effort on this on the asset as well, so that comes to like right now, like the the space is quite empty, and just like what you say and agent say, there's no focal point in the scenes. So
Mhm.
that's why I'm have to rethink about what is the story in the scenes.
Yep.
I think that is important as well.
Yep, I think so too. And you know, like honestly, all it takes is literally, let's say on this area, right? We put like a light above this table, which means that this
Yeah.
table is going to be lit up a little bit more, and then we do something with like a story here, right? It can be whatever you want, right? Like maybe there's like a wallet from someone here. Maybe there's like some open drinks, so that you can kind of see that something happened here, and then like focusing on that with the lighting like a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then you just need to like balance the other lights, right? The only lights that I'm really talking about is these lights, right? So let's do a quick overpaint here. So if we just go in here, I'm gonna really quickly just cover up these lights. I mean, to be fair, that one isn't too bad, but we'll just do it anyway. And
Actually, you
then
give me a very good idea of that. Like putting the light there, it seems like I can only just do some like few props for that. I
yeah,
don't actually have to make a props for like a murder scenes or something.
yep. Yeah, that's totally up to you, right? Like you can make a story with like a couple of props, and just like reorganizing the assets that are already in the scene. You can do so much with that because, for example, you have these space heaters, right? Like these heating elements. If you just put them around the
Yeah.
table as well, that just indicates that like people just shoved them around because that's where they were sitting, right? And then you can kind of, yeah, that can be enough to like enforce that like, oh, someone was here, right? And then maybe there's some clues in the assets that you're going to put on the table, and then you just let people do what they do, right? Like you just let them think about it.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I thinking of like someone maybe like there's some like someone like just just finish smoking and there's some cigarettes on table. They still have some smoke
Mm-hmm.
in the air, something like that.
Yeah, that can work.
Yeah, that is one of the story.
100%. Because it doesn't have to be a lot, right? But it can just be like very simple. You can kind of already see that if we just like put like a little light on this table, it will then like help us to like look in that direction, right? Where we can see like it's pulling us in a little bit more. And then we can do other stuff by putting like a vignette and like balancing the other lights in the scene to then have us focus more and more on that table. You kind of have to balance things out, right? Because I do like the moody lighting that you have. So you don't want to like overdo it with like a singular light. But yeah, you can balance that out as well if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And then on the set dressing side, what is going to be really helpful, because you talk about that it's like you kind of want it to be messy, but messy doesn't need to be uniform, right? what you kind of want to do with mess is you kind of want to cluster it in certain areas. That means that, for example, you just pick a corner and imagine in your story that this is like a place where, I don't know, people are surviving because it's the end of a world or something like that, right? Really quick on the top of my head.
Yeah.
They will probably just move like a bunch of stuff that they can't use just to the sides, right? So the sides are going to be like fully stacked up with just like a bunch of stuff that they can't use. That means that you're going to have like an automatic like cluster happening in certain areas. It doesn't need to be so dramatic again, though. You can just have clustering happening in like this table, and then you remove certain elements next to the table, right? So like the chair that's fallen over, this chair that's fallen over, because what that's going to do is the less noise you have next to that table, the more the detail on the table is going to stand out because it is surrounded by nothing. So we're trying to find like a balance between all the elements in our scene to kind of create like a more an easier to read image for the people that are looking at it. How does that sound?
Digesting.
I know it's a lot.
Yeah. I will find more reference about that.
Yep. Reference always helps.
Or maybe there's some gangster here. I've been here and then like gathering some weapons or something.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a stack of weapons.
Yep. That's totally
I
up
mean,
to
that
you.
makes sense as well. Yeah, I think that makes sense as well because the gangster usually like do a lot of like bad boy stuff like smoking and kicking around on the wall and something like that.
Yeah.
Some damage on the wall as well.
Yep. So here's the thing, right? Like I'm gonna tell you something beautiful. We can make everything make sense. It just depends on how much time we have, really, right? Because that is what we do as artists, right? Like we can build and craft a story if we have like enough elements to support that story. We can kind of make a lot of stuff sense, like visually. It just depends on like how much time we have and how much time we're willing to spend, right? Because I'm totally fine with you doing like a bunch of weapons, for example. Let's take another example completely. Let's say this is like an arms dealer and he deals in like big machine guns. That also means that you need to make like a bunch of machine guns too, you know? And those are like really complex to make. So that's where you kind of have to find a balance again of like, okay, I kind of want to make this cool scene and focus on like a couple of props that will do enough to justify the story.
That makes sense.
Because then, yeah, it comes down to the time thing, right? Like you can make like 1,000 weapons if you wanted to. It's just going to take you like a couple of years at least.
Yeah, true. I mean, like when I'm asking people like for feedback on this project, they're just saying, "Oh, like you have to do that one to make it more sensible for the whole story or something." And then I just list down all of these props I have to do. Like it just like forever.
Yeah. So you know a quick way to I said it before in the stream, but this is like a regular thing, right? It's you have to test things really quickly. So let's say if people recommend you to make like more assets for the scene to make the story more clear, make blockouts,
Yeah.
right? Like do a couple of really quick blockouts of what you need for the scene, in your opinion, get them into the scene, and then you can see like, oh, okay, I think that's enough. I don't need to create like more assets than I have now. Or maybe it's not enough and you have to like add a couple more assets for the story. But you kind of want to put everything into the scene as quick as you can and then test it, right? Like test it visually if it's enough or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
Something in my mind now. Thank you.
I am happy to help. This is a really cool scene though. Like I'm a big fan of the lighting by itself. It also takes me
Yeah.
back because when I was still living in Belgium, I used to have this job in like a Chinese restaurant. So yeah, it takes me back.
Yeah. I have like watched a lot of sort of movie as well, like 19th century of like Hong Kong movies. There
Oh
are a
my
lot of
god,
like
yeah.
from that. Yeah.
Oh, there's a place that would always like inspire like crazy things, and it's Kowloon City. It's no longer
Yeah.
there. It's been demolished, but like there's some really cool documentaries about it from like I don't
Yeah.
know, a couple of decades ago now,
Like
from like
all
the
the
80s, but
yeah,
oh my
all the
god.
clusters, the building as well, like
Yeah.
it's very mystery as well.
Yeah. It's a really, really
Yeah,
interesting place.
they have the movie for that as well.
Yeah, there's a couple of movies that like that were filmed there, I think, but I watched like documentaries because they had like a couple of documentaries. I think it was a German documentary even that had like subtitles, and they
Oh
basically
yeah.
went in there and they were discussing that like Kowloon City was used by like a lot of like really wealthy restaurants because that was the cheapest place to get their like dim sum and stuff. It was really weird. It was so
Yeah,
interesting.
because there is no because that place is no any
There's no law.
like any yeah, it's no law and
Yeah.
there's no place for the government like to place the law in there. Yeah.
Yeah. It was
But
just
it's very
chaos.
interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Cool.
Compared to this, so my scenes is very clear as well. But thank you. I know what I'm have to do next step in the next
Yeah.
step.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on as well, Luis. It was a pleasure to talk to you. And then yeah, for next time, if you want to participate, feel free to put it on there again and re-add the
Yeah.
tag, and then we can talk about it more. I'm looking forward to your updates.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, team.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
You too.
Cool. Thank you for coming on, Luis. That was a pleasure. Yeah, really cool lighting. Really cool project. It was not even shown, but like the assets themselves look really cool already. I'll show it off here as well. Like there's some really beautiful assets that are already being done. Yeah. The attention to detail is there, for sure. One last thing that I'll say. Sorry, I should have said this when you were still around, but don't balance the lighting of the scene to showcase the assets, right? You kind of want to focus on the scene and the storytelling by itself, and then place the assets wherever they make sense for the scene. And then in the breakdown, you can like light them up in beautiful lighting and all that kind of stuff and showcase what you did. Because it is worth showing, 100%. It's just you don't want to cater your environment towards your props, right? Yeah. Thank you. No worries. Happy to help. Moving swiftly on, we got Juancho. Juancho is over here, working on this cool little apartment over here. Cool. A question. What do you think of the color tone right now? I feel like it's a bit warm because I introduced a lot of warm color textures. So that's the thing, right? Like that's why I recommend people to get like textures in as soon as possible, at least with a semi-representative base color, because the lumen is gonna play on that a lot. So yeah. In terms of like how I feel about the tone though, it still feels really good though. I like the fourth shot. It's so good. Yeah, the fourth shot is like the best shot out of all of them. It looks so nice. Just because the balance between the light, it looks so nice. But no, I don't think that's an issue, honestly. I don't think like seeing it's not necessarily warmer than we saw it last time. Maybe the wardrobe textures came in, but they're so tiny that honestly, it's not a big deal, in my opinion. So that is not too big of a deal. So number one. Or the tone. Oh my god, My writing is getting horrendous. Let's ignore that. Cool. Second question was, at this stage, should I make the textures more grungy and dirty since they're quite clean? Or should I fill the gray box item with texture first? Yeah, so that comes back to what I was just saying, right? Like, get all the textures onto the assets first, even if it's just like a base color that is representative of like the final texture, because then at least you kind of know what the final result is sort of going to look like with Lumen, right? So I would do that first. So let's note it down as a workflow. So number 1 would be, well, we're starting from like block out and all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, textures first. Textures as base color. Then do balancing if needed. And then refine. And balance in this case can mean with lighting or with the textures, right? So you can kind of do both things at the same time. But then at least once you got like the whole thing in a good spot, right? We're still going to refine on it later, but if you know that like it's representative of where you want to go, then you can start refining the textures. That's how I would play this. Yeah. Best of luck, Juancho. Thank you for coming in with clear textures as well. That's all clear questions, not textures. I mean, they're both pretty clear, so still counts. But yeah, thank you for showing your work. Appreciate it a lot. We're keeping on track with some texture stuff. So Polina is coming in because she's working on this beautiful Ukrainian house, a hata. But she's looking for some feedback on the clay walls. So I wanted to make the material itself quite plain, so I can use it on different parts of the house. I will add more variety to it with some more decals later on in the scene. You advise what I need to improve on this material. So I cannot actually, because what I would say is we want to get it into the engine. Because right now, if I start giving feedback on this marmoset render, what I'm assuming is a marmoset render, that is not going to be representative of the final result, right? So whenever we want to look at our source of truth, what I mean by that is where is the thing going to be rendered, right? So if you're going to do that in Unreal Engine, then we want to put that on the walls and make sure that it's already like representative of like the final shot or the final asset or whatever it's going to be added on, right? But we want to test that in engine because all different render engines, for example, Unreal, Marmoset, or whatever you use to render, they're going to have a different way of rendering and presenting those materials too. So whenever we want to do our tweaking, we need to do that in the final product, right? So test that in the engine. Get it in there, get it on a couple of walls, quickly unwrap them, and then see how they look in there. Because that is going to be way more representable than the final thing. Overall, I really like how you approach this. You're probably not going to see like the smaller details necessarily until you get like really close up. But I like that it kind of has like a very, yeah, it has a very nice feel to it already. Because yeah, if we compare it to something like this, I could potentially say like, hey, we need to increase like the normal intensity because it still feels like it's a little bit too soft. We could do that. But if it looks different in the engine, we don't know, right? Or I don't even know what the scale of this is or how you're presenting it on this material sphere, right? So sorry to disappoint there a little bit, Paulina, but get it into the engine and then we can talk about like the feedback of it. But otherwise, it's looking nice. So keep up the beautiful work. Connor, we already had. And then Harry. Harry is also new to the... Yeah, I think. Let's see. My first ever environment I'm working on. That's awesome. Okay. Let's see. I'd like some general advice on how to approach doing the textures in the scene, or any advice on tips for planning the props, because I feel like a lot are unique and I want to make my scene optimized where I can. Okay, so this is going to be sort of like a breakdown kind of thing, right? Let's do a little bit of a breakdown. So we're gonna ignore all the stuff that you added. We're just gonna focus on one big image, and we're gonna do a breakdown. So what are we gonna do here? So we're gonna start with blue, and we're gonna do tidables. So we're gonna work with tidables first. I think that's going to be tidables. I mean, basically, the structural stuff is going to be tidables too. So like all this like architectural stuff, that's all going to be tidables. Tidables and vertex painting. Hello, Harry. Let me read your comment in just a sec. Alright, so that's all tidables. We can make these guys out of tidables as well, honestly. Tidables, a little bit of vertex painting, that's going to do as well. Honestly, it might even be better if we do something like this. We are going to build this up with the primary color. Then we're just gonna remove a bunch of stuff, right? So that's gonna be our base layer. Screw it. This is good enough. We're gonna start out with tidables. What we can do with tidables is probably gonna be the easiest thing to set up. Now we're gonna be building on top of that. So we're going to be doing trim sheets next. Right? Because that's the way that I'm seeing this, is like we want to start out with like the simple reusable stuff first and then kind of build on top of it. So all the frames, let's pick a different color. Let's go for something like green. Oh. Right, so all these frames, they're going to be trim sheets. And then we're going to see what opportunities we have to make them, right? Because basically anything that's made out of these like wooden kind of door frames or things like that, we're just going to use that on everything. Cool, so that's going to be trims. It's going to be trims. Same thing here. We can kind of reuse them up here as well. Right, so that's all good. Let's see, what else can we reuse? And then we get to potentially the more unique stuff, but I mean, this is where it kind of depends on your workflow, right? Let me read your comment first. I was thinking vertex painting on UV1 and some alpha mask to break the pattern repetition, if that makes sense, with the UV2 leaking dirt on the base. Vertex alpha paint on UV1 and some alpha mask to break up the pattern repetition, if that makes sense. With UV2 with leaking dirt on the base. Oh no, I would honestly do it like way simpler. I would set up decals. Sorry for the peeling on the wall that was. Yeah. So I would set up for that kind of stuff. Like I would have one damaged wall, one normal wall, right? Because it's super easy to set up in Substance Designer, right? In Substance, you make your damaged wall, and then as soon as that's done, you just strip away the holes and you have like your base wall, right? If you set it up in that way, it becomes like very modular once you set it up in that way. Same thing with the tiles, right? Like you have normal and broken tiles. You can like vertex paint between them. And then the more unique dirt, you kind of just do with decals, right? So it kind of simplifies the whole process because you can do it in your way, but then we're setting up like a really unique texture setup and a really unique like technical solution where we don't really need to. Not a big fan of that myself, honestly. Yeah, that's all trims. Well, probably not the base. And then we kind of get to this kind of stuff. We could do that with tidables as well, to be honest, like these guys. Yeah. So, well, what I would determine next is pick a couple of assets where you really want to showcase that you can do unique details, right? And focus on the things that matter to the scene. So for example, pick something that is like relatively complex. I don't even know what that would be in this scene. Let's say this guy, for the sake of argument, right? You would go in and make that unique. Because the rest, and honestly, the majority of it is just, you know, like all these cables, that's trims, like all this stuff. That's a freaking trim. That stuff is on the same trim. All these pipes and cables, that's on the same trim. These rods are on the same trim. These cables, those cables. That is all just like a singular texture. Yeah, you're basically just cobbling the scene together with what you have, right, at this point. That is, and then this is going to be edibles, and then a couple of opportunities to make like unique stuff could potentially be like these guys, potentially, right? Because you could kind of do that in like, nah, to be honest, I would also just use trims for that too. But I am very like trim heavy. So I would set up like these cupboards and these sides of these, like, what is it, like wardrobe thingies. Same here. That's all trim sheets. And then really focus on like, okay, I need a set of wheels. Cool. That's going to be a unique thing on that trim sheet maybe. And then a bunch of this stuff is going to be unique, right? Because we can do that with trim sheets, but it's going to look horrendous. So these like unique assets, I would literally just make like a set of them, mash them onto like a singular texture sheet, like a 2K or something like that. Mash it all in there so that you have like an atlas for like all these assets, and that's it. Because to be honest, in a game sense, right? If you're working in a professional development, most of these assets are going to be used in conjunction of each other because they're so specific to like the medicinal craft, right? So all that stuff probably going to be unique, but like relatively quickly to make all those. So at this point, like what you want to make yourself, like if you really want to make things unique, I would focus on. So if purple is unique, this is horrendous for people with color blindness, sorry. Focus on storytelling. If you need to do something there. Yeah, trims are really powerful. Just one trim sheet could basically take care of like all the metal. That's what I would set it up as. Because like all the stuff that's in green, well, apart from like the wooden frames, so you would have like, you could have one trim sheet with just like a bunch of metal stuff on there and a bunch of wood. Because what is beautiful about like having all these thin strips is that we don't have to fill up the trim sheet with different dimensions because they're all like relative in size. So we can just add it all to one trim sheet. And that can be, yeah, that just takes care of like all the green stuff. So all the green stuff in this case is all just one singular thing. I was going to have one of those slabs destroyed potentially on the floor, and it could add a complex prop if I feel it would help the story. Yeah, that's the thing. Like I would think about what you can add in terms of a story here, right? You could make like a relatively simple one, or if you just want to keep it like just to the environment, that's fine too. I mean, it's your craft, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's about it. So you can make this stuff in like a relatively simple way, honestly. Because most of it can just be achieved with like relatively simple stuff. But yeah, I would say the way that I would approach it is do titleables, do trim sheets. See, at that point, you have a really good idea what you need to do in the rest of the scene to make it look better than it already does. Because sometimes you might be like, oh, I could do this with a trim, but I actually just want to make it unique to make it look really cool. So that can be up to you. But yeah. Let's see. So that's usually the hierarchy that I work with. So titleables, trim sheets, and then unique. That's the way, because yeah, this takes the most time. These two are really reusable. Someone suggested after the blockout to go through the full process of a material and a prop to get a good idea of my workflow. I was going to do on that too. Yep. Yeah, that is whatever you want to call that. It's called a benchmark. It's called a vertical slice. It's basically you want to test the workflow that you're going to use. You kind of figure out all like the issues that you're going to have with it. And then the rest of it becomes easy because you figure out like the issues that you might have in the first week of the project, and then the rest of it is just, oh, now I just need to execute. So I think that's great. Yeah. Thanks for joining, Harry. Thank you so much for joining the community and also putting your work up as well. Best of luck on your first entry into environment art. Wish you the best of luck, man. And we're here to help if you need it. Swiftly moving on to Moonlight. Moonlight has a couple of questions. So Moonlight is making a bunch of sweet looking pastry. All the high poly pastries have different density mesh so far. Should I harmonize all of them or should I not care about it? So for high poly meshes, you don't care about it because the only thing that matters for your high polys is that you get clean bakes out of them. And that means that if they have enough density for your textures, that's all you care about. Don't do this, please. But let's say your high poly needs like 50,000 triangles to look good. You can do that. Also, it wouldn't make a difference apart in baking speeds if it was like 5 million triangles. It will make no real difference because at a certain point, you're restricted by your texture size, right? Because all the data is going to be stored in pixels anyway. So if you sculpt like a bunch of really cool detail, but you bake it down onto like a 256 like texture, you're not going to see that anyway because it just gets blurred because it doesn't have enough pixels. So that's one question out of the way. So number 2, how detailed should those pastries be? I would like to avoid wasting time on details that nobody may not see. Well, this is for you to figure out, right? So because it depends on your texturing style, it depends on the details that you want to go for. So I can't really help you with that question. So it comes down to what Harry said before, you kind of just want to test it. Pick one of them that is ideally like your more complex one, and then use that as a benchmark to test how detailed you want to go and what kind of style. Because once you have all those questions figured out, then it's easier to then translate that to other props as well. So let's try some stuff down here, make some notes. So number 1 was high poly density is only relevant to baking. Texture baking. Number 2 is what we just talked about. You want to benchmark an asset. If that is a question that you have, you want to benchmark a single asset. And this is honestly, this is at the core of what makes you an artist, right? We are visual problem solvers. So this is probably like really interesting for everyone else to know out there as well, is that what we do as a craft is we solve visual issues. So that's why oftentimes you'll hear me talk about like, oh, we need to reduce the amount of noise here, or we need to find like a better balance between areas of rest or detail, because I have that mindset now from like my experience where that is all to help the viewer or the player navigate spaces better, right? Obviously we have more leeway when it comes to our personal work. We don't have to be that restricted by it, but we still want to make like visually interesting images that kind of have like a good composition and all that kind of stuff. Number 3, I heard the advice to reduce the scope of the project. I'm still thinking about it, and I had some advice. What about just working on one floor? So I proposed to change the staircase into a veranda with stained glass to keep the Art Nouveau atmosphere. That is honestly up to you. I have no decision making in that. I'm going to be a little bit more hands-off because, yeah, it just depends on what you feel comfortable with, how quickly you can potentially like get it done, and how long your timeline for the project is as well. So if this is your way of downsizing and you're comfortable with this, you want to tackle this as a project and you're comfortable that you can hit it, that's all I care about, right? My goal is not, and this is oftentimes what is tricky about Whip Wednesday, because there's a lot of context that is missing. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to set everyone up for successful projects that they can post on their portfolio. So that's why oftentimes when I see people that I perceive to be like newer, I'm not saying that this is the case in this example, but just as a general thing, like newer people, I'll push more towards like do a single thing, do something really, really small, and then build up your skills over time. Because yeah, that means that you can do a smaller project. It's more motivational to see yourself doing smaller things and then being like, oh my god, I made my first asset. I'm so proud of myself, you know? Because it is really demotivating to work on like a big scene that has like a ton of assets and you've made like one asset and you look up and it's like, oh my god, I've done like not even 1% of the scene. What am I doing? That is really demotivating. So that is the thing. But I there's a part of me that can't like, I don't know who you are as a person, like how good you are with like self-motivation, all that kind of stuff. So I'll leave that decision up to you. I think it's a good choice to already diminish it from like 2 floors to a single floor though. I think that's good. Yeah. Nice pastries. Keep it up, Moonlight. Next one is Satvik. Just as a last call, we're getting into the last 4 of the call for tonight. But if you want to discuss, come onto the stage. Feel free to hop into the event room if you're available. And also for people in the chat, feel free to ask any questions or bring up any topics that you want to discuss as well. I haven't given that reminder like a lot of the times today, but yeah. Going versatile or specific? What do you mean? In terms of like your skills that you want to display on your portfolio? Safan? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Let's see. Satvik, the feedback that I'm looking for, composition, supplementing the story, game loop with visuals, and everything else that might feel wrong with the scene. As I want to try art directing without having any experience, so I want to take in all the feedback and info. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Oh, sorry, Mustafa. Are you talking about like if that is like for you yourself in the future, if you need to go versatile or specific? The short answer there is AAA specific. Anything else versatile or generalistic. That would be my recommendation. If you really want to distill it down. Let me get some context here because Satvik is saying in the chat. So quick context, this is an ongoing project which started as simply a simple hallway exercise that blew out of proportion to what it is now. Is it a good idea to do that? I'm still debating on that. This is a major red flag, right? If you are telling me this, that is a sign that we need to scope down. Like immediately. Like take like the previous conversation into account as well, right? I'm trying to set you up for success. If you are already thinking about like, I don't know if this is a good idea, that is a sign of yourself saying that like, hey, maybe this is too crazy. So yeah, I would honestly not do this. If that is already, if you're thinking about this and you're keeping in mind, we're not even in like a game engine or anything like that, right? We haven't really gotten to like, because you mentioned that you want to do, so you bring up, to be fair, I also have no context of what your skill level is, right? So I'm just going to assume that if you have that already, and going from your mood board already, I don't think this is advisable for your skill level. Because you saw your design lead do art direction and story and gameplay based decisions that maybe go, I want to do that. So here's the thing, right? Like it is really cool that you get to do that, but those people are in that position because think about what their job is, right? They get to direct other people to do the actual work. So if we really cut down on the responsibilities and the work that you have to do, you want to stick to your lane to kind of keep it simple. What that means is that if you are in the beginning of your environment art journey, you just need to stick to making an asset, making a diorama, making an environment. Leave the design work and the art directing to someone else because you're still in the process of learning all the technical skills that you need to learn to get to that point. Now, I'm going to give you a blueprint. If you want to do this, if you want to like self-art direct and all that kind of stuff, what you would need to pick up is 2D skills. Because 2D is way better for iteration and allows you to do like 10 times the amount of work compared to 3D. 3D is slow compared to 2D. So if you really want to do art direction, if that is like the main goal, I would advise you to do it to like 2D instead. I know, weird conversations, probably not the outcome that you were like expecting, but that's the way that I would want to push you then. Because that is going to have a clearer roadmap towards becoming an art director. Because yeah, it is just way simpler to iterate on. So with this one, what I'm gonna do is I am not gonna give you direct feedback yet, because I do want to have your opinion on what was discussed today. So the main thing was, if there's already if there's already doubt in like, oh, maybe this is like a little bit crazy, that usually means that it is. Then that's a red flag, right? That's a warning sign to yourself. Secondly, because I don't want to just shoot stuff down here either, right? So the second thing would be, if you really want to art direct, if that is the goal. Oh, Dylan, no, you're still in the running. It's just going to be a long session. We still have 3 more people left after this. So the second thing that I brought up, if art directing is the goal, then if that is really the goal, right? If that is really what you want to do, we need to look into 2D and concept art instead, because that will increase your iteration time and you're focusing more on the design of things rather than the execution of those things, right? Important distinction. As an environment artist, right? As a 3D modeler, we are usually not designing, unless you look at some crazy examples like Vitaly Bulgarov or someone like that, where they are designing stuff in 3D, but that takes a lot of experience and skill, right? I'm not saying that that is not like a legitimate path to go for, but what they usually do is they find, again, like a thing that we brought up before, right? They find a small thing to really focus on, to iterate on, to find the design, and then they go wide. So you want to be specific, and then you want to branch out. So same thing happens here. Let me know how you feel about that, Suffolk. Justin, since I've been a bit out of the loop, have you finally published your book? Spot on my desk for it is still empty. No, the book is going to take a while longer because we switched to focusing purely on the course. So the focus right now is on the course, which would be like the biggest thing that we're currently working on, and we're making some really good progress. So we're gonna soon share our first lesson that is fully edited with all the video content, all that kind of stuff. That's gonna be the template for the future. We're gonna be sharing that for early feedback. But that is like the main focus right now. And then all this stuff, giving feedback, doing portfolio reviews, doing BE Unwrapped on Sunday, doing the workshops, all that kind of stuff. The stuff that we basically have going on, that is like the main focus right now. But the book, unfortunately, is on the back burner for a little bit. Dylan, let's switch over to you then. Dylan is working on a Brutalist Fortress. First post for asking for feedback here. If I screw up the format or anything, I apologize in advance. No, it's all good. It's all good. Let's see. So usually, oh, there we go. As of now, I'm mainly looking for feedback on my shape language and the composition. Okay. World War II bunkers and video games controlled by Remedy. Yeah. Cool, we got some Brutalist designs going on here as well. That's cool, you kind of got some like bunker stuff happening there. And then you got like some sort of like detail. That is probably like the only thing that kind of feels like not weird, but like a little bit out of place for like Brutalist architecture, right? Just like Because I would assume that was just gonna be like a chunk of bare concrete, you know? Just bare concrete. But I do like the language that you have going on with like these very, very bunker-like looking shapes, right? What you could potentially do is little details, right? So you could just have like a little lights. I know this is just block out, right? But that would kind of make sense in terms of like the story, right? So you kind of have like two massive lights just beaming down on like the entrance of it. And that is going to make the whole thing feel like really menacing as well. Right? We're leaning into like how freaking menacing this whole thing looks. When it comes to this kind of shape, I kind of see what you're going for. I would honestly lean more into the functionality of it then. Right, so like these are like layered pillboxes, right? And that's cool because you can kind of, it's really easy to read, right? That's what it comes down to. It's the form following the function, right? It's very bare bones, like brutalistic, like very functional design. And that's what this kind of feels just, yeah, we're not really sure what this is. So if I'm kind of expecting like, okay, we just make this like one solid chunk, right? And make it like really boring brutalist stuff with maybe like a little lip or something like that. Right? To kind of reinforce like the big shapes. Or we say like, hey, we turn it into these guys. Into bunkers. So functionality or bigger shapes. Because what is really cool about these kind of shapes is that you have this like massive chunk and you have like a little detail on the top of it. And is that balance between the two that is really interesting, right? Because it's a contrast between this large, like plain looking thing, and then there's like this kill box on top of it. It's just a contrast between those shapes that is what really makes it interesting. Yeah, because that's the thing. Like, this looks menacing, right? The shapes that you have going on, simplifying it a little bit, that's gonna be sick. But yeah, if we then do something like this, kind of have this coming out like way more than it does. That also adds to the functionality bit again, right? Because now, how I'm thinking about this space is that this is almost like a lip that is meant to keep you out. Right, so you know in prisons where they kind of have like these barbed wire fences and they have like fucking shit ton of like barbed wire on top of it. Same idea, right? We're just like leading into the brutalism aspect and we're just like, cool, you're not coming in because that lip is gonna stop you from coming in. So yeah, you got a couple of options here. Feel free to experiment with that a little bit. Yeah, but the composition itself, like you can do so much cool stuff here. A couple of lights, different time of day. This stuff is gonna look sick. And you can really easily like cover the back of it up with like a bunch of trees as well. Instead of having like the mountains in the back. Just cover it in trees. Because there's two things there, right? Like if you cover the background up in trees. Point number 1 is let's work. Cool. Love that. Point number 2, it kind of also works into like the whole hidden the hidden aspect of it, right? Like it's like, oh, it's in the middle of a forest. Like people have forgotten about this. There's just like this little pathway that's kind of overgrown, but like the gates are open. Right? If that is the thing that you want to go for, I may have skipped that. Secret military base. Yeah. Yeah. That could be cool. I love it though. Love the idea. It's also just like a really nice portfolio piece in terms of like the amount of time that you're gonna spend on this. It's gonna be cool to see. Yeah. Thanks for posting your work, Dylan. And again, I'm glad you're doing it. Like the first poster asking feedback, so it was a pleasure to be able to have a look at your work, man. Cool. Last 2 for today. So we're gonna jump to Sorav. These are some screenshots of the current progress from different angles. I would like to get some feedback on the materials, colors, and overall look. Okay. Let's have a look. First indication here is I would try to find... I mean, you got like a texture ref over here. It's pretty small though. Yeah, we're not going to be able to see anything on that, really. Yeah, I'm super excited about it. I'm not entirely sure if I want it to be abandoned or not. I appreciate you taking the time to give some notes. Yeah, no worries. I mean, I would definitely think about that first, so that you can decide. Well, that's basically part of the foundation that you were talking about, right? Like figuring out what the story is going to be, because that also has a big impact on like what assets you need to make, like how you're going to set dress everything. So definitely spend some time thinking about it. So the materials here, is a really harsh transition, right? So that's the first thing. Between the metal and the rust, it is just too contrasting. It's almost like the balance between them is like, oh, this is pristine, but then this is like damaged, like completely damaged, like ruined, you know? We need to find a transition between ruined and pristine. So that's where like better references come in. Like potentially this guy could be really interesting, but it's really hard to tell. But you kind of want to have a transition from, you have your rust layer, right? And then you have like your damaged rust, and then you have like subtle rust. And there's kind of like a gradient. So we're going from like heavy to medium to small. Right? And that can be applied to like everything. Also, this oxidization that happens, think about the material that it's on, right? Oxidization only happens on copper. Well, not only, but like happens most frequently on copper materials. I think this might be like an... I'm not sure if it was copper, actually. Sterling. Yeah. Oh, there's some other people giving like really good advice as well. Yeah. Shout out to our lovely community for giving lovely advice. That is awesome. So if we're gonna have like this oxidized material, is that copper? Because then why is it not happening on these guys, right? I mean, it's kind of happening on that guy, but it just feels out of place. So yeah, what I would say is definitely overall reduce the amount of destruction that you have going on. Reduce the destroyed aspect of it. And yeah, focus on blending as a focus point. It's going to be really important here. Blending things together, making sure that the transitions between materials look really nice. That's going to be like the key focus point. And that comes down to good ref, right? Like good references are the key here. So be specific with the material and with the prop, right? The prop comes secondary, but like make sure that if you look for references that they are relevant to the material that you're making. Be very specific, right? Is it like copper? Is it steel? Is it stainless steel? Is it like galvanized? Like is it whatever texture it is? You need to get really close because that is gonna have a big difference on how it like ages over time. Yeah. So yeah, that's the main thing. Reducing those hard transitions and also be pulling back on like how destroyed it is, or like just the contrast between the destroyed elements and the undestroyed elements. All right. Thank you for posting your work, Sorav. Yeah, and thanks again for like all the people like sharing their work there as well, or sharing their feedback. Sorry. Last one for today is Andrew. Andrew Little is back. Just had a lovely chat with him in the chat a couple of days ago. That was awesome. So there is a cool story here. Let me see if there's a question. It would be if you, this is recommendation for everyone, right? If you have a post that has like a lot of stuff in it, please help me make my life easier by just highlighting the stuff that you want me to look at. That would be so appreciated. I'll put that in the future post as well. Really needing some general feedback. What is working, what isn't. Suggestion for the landscape, what it needs in order to pop. So we're probably just gonna focus on this guy then. I'm not gonna focus on the assets. Detail shots, we're gonna delete those. There we go. Okay. So let's focus on the bigger picture. The one thing that I see is we're missing medium to small shapes, especially when it comes to scatter on the landscape, right? So what you would expect is you have like these bigger shapes, cool, and then you have like some smaller shapes that kind of break that up again, and you have like some really tiny shapes that just like create like a little bit more interest around it. Right? And those are probably like going to be like physical assets that you just have to scatter on the terrain. Kind of like these guys, right? But making sure that whenever you do something like this, that you have like an interesting an interesting kind of like setup where you kind of cluster things together, kind of make like interesting mini compositions. So those mini compositions are going to be nice. That's the first thing that I will say. The layering on the rocks in the back, like on the cliffs, looks really nice. And the way that it kind of blends together with the terrain, that looks lovely as well. Love to see it. And we've got this beautiful planet in the background. If there was an area where you want to invest a little bit more time, is the area where the contrast of the horizon, like the silhouette, is going to be the most visible. So that would be like number 3, like making sure that the silhouette of the whole thing reads nice, because you have some like really interesting shapes going on here. That looks like really cool from like a silhouette perspective. Focus on this space for the silhouette. Right. So we've got 1, 2, 3. I think honestly, if you're gonna do those like 3 things, the third one is a little bit minor in hindsight, but the first 2 are gonna have like a big impact on how this whole thing is gonna look. And then also making sure that you hide some of the low res textures in the foreground, or maybe even like up res them. Or just, you can do it in so many ways, right? Like you can up res the texture, you can add more set dressing to that area to kind of like hide it. You can put like foreground elements into place, all that kind of stuff, because you have, this texture is really crisp, right? So that's awesome. But then it's added on a surface that looks low res. And again, because we always have to look through the lens of comparison, right? So the way that I compare these two is like you have a crisp surface and you have a low res surface, which is just gonna like distract the whole thing. It's not too bad. This might be like the worst area because we actually have some normal stuff happening there, right? Like for the normal map. But yeah. In the grand scheme, really cool stuff though. I love the assets as well, even though we didn't really talk about it. But the textures, they look really clean on them. I love how they look. I just like how they feel as well. I feel like this is like really, really well done. Yeah. You're gonna have to be careful with this stuff, right? This is even worse. Like just seeing the comparison between like this juicy, crisp looking texture, and then you have this like, oh, low res mess over here. That's something you have to be aware of for just like the final presentation, right? Because that's going to be, even though you see that in games all the time, like you have to be somewhat careful with that. You can do like a decal or something like that, like a stone decal to kind of hide it. So many ways of doing it. Yeah. Thank you so much, Andrew, for putting your work out there. Glad to have you back. It was lovely to talk to you. But we've sadly come to the end of this beautiful Whip Wednesday. We've been going for almost 3 hours, so it was a really chunky session again. But I appreciate you all for being here, sitting through like this entire session. It was awesome to have you. If you want to know what's happening next, Saturday we have a workshop going on about material layering in Unreal Engine, and that's going to be awesome with you, Chu. Looking forward to that. And then on Sunday, we're going to have our first live session of BE Unwrapped, where I'll be talking about like how to start a new project. I'm going to lay out some fundamental knowledge, and I'm going to, just going to share like a lesson. It's going to be a lesson format with like Q&A afterwards as well. So if you want to join for that, feel free to do so. And I'm going to leave you with like one last thing. It would be really, really appreciated and really helpful if you have any sort of question about how to start a new environment project, that you can leave like a question in this little questionnaire over here if you wanted to. This is going to be really helpful. It gives me a bunch more stuff to talk about as well, so that I can help more people out there. So if you have any questions on what it means to you to start a project and what you struggle with the most, feel free to go onto that questionnaire, fill in a question, and that would be like really helpful for me. So with that said, I'm going to be heading out. So thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate you sticking around for like 3 hours. It was a really long session, but I wish you all a nice evening, and I'll see you all on Sunday. Looking forward to it. Bye-bye.